I'm sitting in my living room right now. I've been grading some papers and I'm getting a little tired of doing that. So I thought I'd come on and talk a little bit about one of the more unusual symptoms of RSD CRPS, which is an autonomic symptom. And that symptom is an intolerance of extremes of temperature. It's got to be close to 100 degrees out today. It's very, very humid. There's an extreme heat warning or something like that that's been issued. So I'm staying put in the house. If you've got RSD, CRPS, you may also experience an intolerance to extreme heat or maybe even extreme cold like I do. The heat is much worse for me than the cold is, to the point where if I were to go outside on a day like this, even if I didn't exert myself and I just sat quietly in a shady spot, what would happen after about 15 minutes, I would be drenched in sweat, first of all, head to toe, and I would start to feel very nauseous and very lightheaded. At that point, if I don't get inside and get cooled off quickly, I can get extremely nauseous to the point of vomiting. I can get sick to my stomach. I can get some gastrointestinal upset, if you know what I mean. And I can even faint. I can't describe how quickly it comes on. It's the strangest thing. It's like a wave that comes over you. And I know it well enough now to know that as soon as I feel it, I have to get out of the heat. If I were to try to exert myself on a hot day, it would come on a lot quicker and it'd probably be a lot worse. It's very frustrating when you have these sorts of autonomic symptoms. It's even more frustrating in a way than the pain is, because these kinds of symptoms are utterly debilitating in the moment. In other words, when they come on, it doesn't matter if you're with company or if you're doing something that, other people are watching you. When it happens, it happens. And like I said, if you don't get inside to a cooler place very quickly, it can be very embarrassing and hard to explain to people why suddenly you have to get into the bathroom, lay down often on the bathroom floor in order to get the nausea to calm itself down enough so you don't vomit. A temperature intolerance is not the only autonomic symptom that comes with RSD, CRPS. There are other autonomic symptoms as well, and they all relate to the fact that with RSD, it's the sympathetic side of the autonomic nervous system that's affected. Not to get too far into the weeds here, but you have to remember that you have a voluntary side of your nervous system and an involuntary side. And that involuntary side is taking care of all the things that you don't think about. They happen regardless of whether you're thinking of them or not. So things like breathing, and things like organ function, digestion, and things like that. And of course, on that involuntary side, there's a sympathetic branch and there's a parasympathetic branch. In RSD, like the name suggests, it's the sympathetic side that doesn't work correctly. Reflex sympathetic dystrophy. And your sympathetic nervous system is your fight or flight nervous system. It's the part of that involuntary response that involves stress hormone, involves fight or flight. It also involves epinephrine or adrenaline and another neurotransmitter called norepinephrine. And it can affect everything from your eyes to the amount of saliva you have in your mouth, to how rapidly you're breathing, to again, your gastrointestinal processes, to your liver and kidneys and everything else. So it's not something that causes pain necessarily, but it is something that causes sudden, hard to predict responses. And one of those responses is related to temperature extremes. It's funny, you know, it's really the hot extreme that affects me, but I know that there are people, and you may be one of them, that are affected more by a cold extreme. I know for myself, I get a flare of RSD symptoms anytime the seasons are changing. So I expect to flare as spring becomes summer. I expect to flare as fall becomes winter. Once a season sets in, and once the temperature becomes fairly stable, I'm usually pretty good. I'm usually at a more predictable level of pain every day. But when it comes to these autonomic symptoms, as soon as the weather warms up, I'll say late spring, early summer, the only thing I can predict about it is that it happens periodically anytime the temperature goes above about 85 degrees. If it's hot and humid, I'm at a higher risk of it happening. And what that means for me is that I don't do a lot during the day, during the hot summer months. I kind of jokingly refer to the summer as my vampire time, because during the day I'm really tucked away in the house, in the air conditioning. And then if I'm going to go out, which I do like to do, I mean, I like to walk the dogs and I like to go kayaking. I like to visit with friends. Those things have to happen either early in the morning before it gets warm, or in the evening once the sun is going down and the air cools off a little bit. My vampire days. I know people who talk about how they don't like being in an air-conditioned space because they don't like the way air conditioning feels. And they'll say that they much prefer to just, you know, open the window and try to get a breeze, or maybe use a fan in the house. And I get that. That makes sense to me. You know, the summer months can be lovely in their own right. But for me, I need the air temperature to be below about 80, and ideally around 70. I've spoken to several doctors about this autonomic problem, this particularly autonomic problem, and it's almost as though some of them don't believe it. Some of them think that, oh, you just don't like the heat. Or I've had doctors say, oh, you're just out of shape, you're not fit. If you were a little more fit, you could tolerate the heat better. But here's the thing, it really doesn't have to do with fitness. Because if it's cool outside, I can do physical activity and never have it happen. But if it's hot, either when I'm doing physical activity or I'm not doing physical activity, I can get it to happen. As I said, I can be sitting in a chair under a shady tree with a glass of lemonade in my hand. And if it's 90 degrees out and 90% humidity, there's a decent chance I'm going to have a spell come over me where I get very lightheaded, very dizzy, nauseous, and I need to get into cool air or I'm going to pass out. So it's hard when friends want to do things outside during the summer months, it's the time of the year when you do all kinds of fun, warm weather activities. But I have to say no. I have to say no most of the time because I know well enough that if I get into a situation where I get overheated, there's going to be trouble. I'm lucky in the sense that I can only remember it happening in front of family members. I don't think it's ever happened in front of just a friend or a colleague, thank goodness. I've had to explain to family members why I would suddenly get up and go into the house and lay down on the floor, usually, somewhere close to the bathroom, just in case I needed to be sick. I've had to explain that to family, but for the most part, they're pretty understanding. I do feel bad, though, when friends invite me somewhere and I say no again and again. I always try to say to people, thank you for the invitation. I hope that you'll think of me again and maybe we can do something different next time. But sometimes I wonder what they're thinking when I have to refuse invitations, when I have to refuse them one after the other during the warm summer months. When the vampire days descend on me, I try not to just sit and sulk in the house. I try to make the best use of the time that I can. But I find that I'm more fatigued even when I'm in the air conditioning. And if I get busy in the house, even in the air conditioning, I will heat up and I get warmer than other people around me do. For example, if I'm doing a lot of housework during the summer months in the air conditioning, I still try to do it either early in the morning or later in the afternoon and evening. Because if I start vacuuming and picking things up, what's going to happen is very quickly, again, I'll be drenched in sweat, even if I'm in the AC. Excessive sweating is actually one of the more common symptoms, autonomic symptoms again, that's associated with RSD. And when I say I sweat excessively, if I'm wearing a t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans, for example, I will sweat through the blue jeans. Not just at my waistband where you might expect, but all the way down both legs. I will sweat through the blue jeans. It's pretty remarkable, and it's pretty embarrassing if there are people around. One of the things I have to remember is to be sure to stay hydrated, even if I'm just doing things in the house. Because I am sweating more than other people do, I have to remember to drink more than other people might so that I don't accidentally become dehydrated. It's helpful during the vampire days to try to get up early, even earlier than I might ordinarily. And therefore, I have to go to bed even earlier than I might ordinarily. But I tell myself that the summer really is the shortest part of the year for me. It really only is typically June, July, and August that I'm really stuck inside. I can do a lot outside during the winter months, even when it gets extremely cold, and it does where I live. If I put on the right clothing and I layer on enough clothing, I can be fairly active even on the coldest days outside. So I'm smack in the middle of the vampire days right now. I am working. I'm teaching a class remotely, so I have work to do every day, and that helps to pass the time. I can't say that I don't get sad sometimes when I look out the window and the sky is a beautiful blue and people are swimming in the nearby lake and I'm stuck inside. I can't say that that doesn't bother me sometimes. It does. But I try to remember that it's only a short time, really. It's only a few months out of the year. And I can go back outside once it cools off a little bit. I can go swimming or go see a friend or go do some kind of activity as long as I wait until it cools off a little bit. So I try not to get too down about it if I can help it. I hope that your summer days are going well. I hope the pain isn't too bad right now. And if you're like me and you're in your vampire days, I hope you have some really fun things that you can engage in the house to help keep you busy and distracted. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.